Hi guys, my name's Linnea, and today we're going to be going over the skeletal muscle structure that you need to know for the CSCS exam. To go more in depth, please go to my next YouTube video where we will be going over the sliding filament theory. But for now, let's jump right into it. So to begin, we're going to start with looking at the three layers of connective tissue within a muscle. So while this diagram here can look pretty confusing, lots going on, I tried to simplify it into a smaller diagram here. So when we look at this smaller diagram, this big circle, which you see here, is going to represent the muscle as a whole. And the connective tissue that surrounds this muscle as a whole, which we see here in this diagram, is called the epimysium. So the epimysium is going to be our outermost layer of connective tissue. And I like to remember this because epi means on or over in Latin. And if you think about it, it's over the whole muscle. So epi, over the whole muscle, epimysium. So then our second connective tissue layer is going to be our perimysium, which we see here in this diagram or coming up here. If we blow this up, looking at a fascicle here, or here. So if you see this is the muscle as a whole, it gets taken into a fascicle, which is a bundle of muscle fibers. Oops, didn't mean to do that. We see that it's surrounded by the perimysium. So this is going to be our middle layer, and it's going to surround a bundle of muscle fibers called a fasciculus. All right, moving on to our smallest layer of connective tissue we need to know is our endomysium. So this connective tissue layer is going to surround each individual muscle fiber. So looking up back at this diagram, we see we have a muscle fiber and the endomysium surrounding it. Okay. Moving on to more in depth of a skeletal muscle fiber. So again, can look pretty confusing here. All right. So I tried to break it up to make it a little bit more simple. So here we have our muscle fiber cell as a whole. All right. Looking at it, we have our myofibrils in here, which are going to contain an apparatus called the sarcomere that contracts the muscle cell. And it's going to consist of two types of filament, actin and myosin, which we will get into a little later. But for right now, what I want us to focus on is looking at the sarcolemma here, which is going to surround this muscle fiber cell. And it essentially the muscle fiber membrane. All right, that's going to surround a muscle fiber as a whole. Looking even deeper, all right, coming up here, we have something called the sarcoplasmic reticulum, which is going to be very important for you to know for this exam. The sarcoplasmic reticulum is essentially an intricate system of tubules, and it's going to be responsible for three main things: storing calcium, it's the release side of calcium, and it's going to regulate the process of muscle fiber contraction and relaxation. But for now, looking at this diagram here, it's going to be these red lines, okay? So again, an intricate system of tubules responsible for the uptake and release of calcium in contraction and relaxation of a muscle. So then looking at the second thing we really need to know is a transverse tubule, which you can see here by these purple lines. So basically, they're going to run perpendicular to our sarcoplasmic reticulum, and it's going to terminate in the vicinity between two vesicles, right? So terminates between two vesicles. I'm going to go more in depth in this in the next video, but for now I will let you know that because they run between outlying myofibrils, which are these guys here within our muscle fiber, and are continuous with the sarcolemma, our layer of cell membrane here, which surrounds our muscle fiber, It is going to enable an action potential to arrive nearly simultaneously from the surface to the depths of all the muscle fiber, which is incredible, and we will get into a little bit later. The third and final thing that I really need you to know as far as the structure of a muscle fiber is something called the sarcoplasm. And the sarcoplasm is essentially a cytoplasm of a muscle fiber. So it's going to contain all our contractile components, such as protein filaments, other proteins, stored glycogen and fat, our enzymes, and our specialized organelles, like our mitochondria, which we see here, and our sarcoplasmic reticulum. So here you can see I drew that sarcoplasm right here, as if this line is kind of essentially this sarcolemma peeled back, if that makes sense. So then moving on into our myofibril structure, right? So this is going to be looking at these little guys here, blown up. So essentially within a myofibril, we're going to have something called myofilaments, which are our actin and myosin. And within these myofibrils are these contractile units called our sarcomeres. Okay, so looking at a sarcomere structure, we're gonna have an A band, which is here, and it's gonna correspond with the alignment of our myosin filaments, which are these dark pink filaments here. Okay, and our A band is going to be a little bit darker in color because it contains both actin and myosin. Then we're going to move on to look at our I band, which corresponds with the area in two adjacent sarcomeres. And it's going to contain only actin, which gives it that lighter color to it. All right, then we're going to look at our Z line, which is going to run longitudinally through the I band, and it's thin and dark, and it essentially is the boundary of the sarcomere, and it separates sarcomeres. So then looking at our next section, which is our H zone here, all right, it's the center of the sarcomere, and it contains only myosin. So then we have our M line as well, which connects sarcomeres. It's this dark, thicker line here, and it's going to connect the sarcomeres together in parallel. So that's the structural components of a sarcomere that you will need to know for the CSCS exam. And another key structure fact that you're going to need to know is that the myosin and the actin are what gives skeletal muscle its striated appearance. So if you looked at muscle through a microscope or something and you saw that it looked striated, that would be due to the actin and myosin present within the skeletal muscle. So then this is essentially just another diagram of a sarcomere, which if you took a picture of to use for study, I would highly recommend because I just like this diagram a lot better personally. I think it does a much better job at showing the Z lines and just the structure of the sarcomere in general. Okay, and then moving down here to our myofilaments, which again are our actin and our myosin. And we will get more in depth in this again in our other video when we go over the sliding filament theory. But for now, the two structural components you really need to know are our two protein molecules, troponin and tropomyosin. So you can see these up here. We have our troponin protein molecules and then our tropomyosin protein molecules running through here. All right, so essentially, the main facts you need to know for now about troponin is that it is bound to tropomyosin, which you can see here, and it contains the calcium binding site, which will be very important when we go over muscle contraction. All right, tropomyosin, what you need to know is that it is not bound to actin. So if we look up here, it may look like it's bound to actin, but it is not bound to the actin. which again, this is an actin myofilament, and this would be a myosin myofilament. All right, so it's a myofilament that lies in the groove of a double helix structure of actin. And as you can see, this actin kind of looks like a double helix, so it's just going to be lying within the structure of the actin. And at rest, it's going to block binding sites for the myosin cross bridge to occur. So we'll go over that more in depth in the next video. But overall, guys, this is the skeletal muscle structure that you're going to need to know for the CSCS exam. And I would also go over motor units and the neuromuscular junction, which we will probably also tap into in our next video discussing the sliding filament theory. But just know the main thing is that a motor unit is a motor neuron and all the fibers it innervates. But again, click on my next video for more information regarding the contraction of muscle, the sliding filament theory, and even more in depth in skeletal muscle structure. Thanks for watching and have a great day.